Ah, you've caught me. I'm shopping for a 2013 Mac Pro. I know. Who in their right mind would be buying a computer that is so hopelessly out of date and so hopelessly flawed? But just look at it. It's fantastic, isn't it? That design, it's iconic. And for some reason, it's got under my skin, and I just want one again. So I had one of these Mac Pros, and I made quite a few videos about it on the channel, and later on I sold it because I needed a more powerful machine to do my video editing. Ever since, it's kind of been burning away at me. It's like my guilty pleasure. I need to have one of these 2013 trash can Mac Pros again. And recently I did a video where I talked about the CPUs that you could put in the Mac Pro, and I came to the conclusion that what you really want is an 8-core CPU. I was so convinced by my own arguments that I went out and bought one of those CPUs. And now I feel like I need a Mac Pro to fit around this CPU. Now that is dangerous logic, to say the least. Why on earth would I spend, I think this was like £25 or something on a CPU, and then spend 10 times that much on the computer to go around it? But I just want one. I've always liked the 2013 Mac Pro design, and I actually think it was an innovation at the time. It just so happens that Apple weren't right about multi-GPU computing. But I've been building a lot of computers before this machine came out, and I'd often wondered about the way that we build computers and how hot air obviously rises, but the typical computer chassis has all of the components on this side, and they vent out the front and the back of the case. And I used to think to myself, what if you could have a case? And in my mind, it was more of a triangular design, I guess. But I was thinking, why not have all of the components on a central heatsink and vent through the top? And that's what Apple did with this computer. And it is a great idea, except where it isn't. So with the Mac Pro, you basically have a triangular shaped heatsink. And on one side of that, it's got the logic board. So you've got your CPU. On the other two sides, you have the GPUs. And on one of the GPUs, you then have the SSD mounted on top of it. So you could get to situations where you were working the CPU and the GPUs hard, as well as the SSD. And a typical example of this is video editing. And you would get this kind of perfect storm where each of those components would be heating up. They're all attached to that central heatsink, and the system would just overload. Mostly because Apple's fan curve was so conservative. They really prioritized keeping the machine quiet. So any Mac Pro users out there will probably have installed an app like TG Pro, something like that, so they can control the fans themselves. And then it does work fine. Obviously, you get a bit more noise. Of course, the design was flawed because the multi-GPU computing thing never really took off. Apple supported it in their own apps like Final Cut Pro, but other manufacturers, other software developers didn't give widespread support for it, so the concept kind of died. And the machine isn't upgradable. Apple sold this right up to 2019, I think, as a current machine, and they never updated it in that time. So you've got these old Xeon version 2 CPUs, and of course, because of the generation of the CPU, that limits you to PCI Express version 2, which limits you to Thunderbolt 2. And of course, there's no way to put a PCI Express card in this chassis. So you had to buy a separate enclosure for that and run it via Thunderbolt 2. And you could do that. And of course, I also showed how you can get it working with an external GPU with some pretty decent results. But overall, for the pro user, this wasn't a great computer. But still, I still want one. I can't help it. I think it's a really sleek design, and it doesn't take up a huge desk footprint, so it would sit nicely behind my monitor right next to my PC workstation at home. And what I want to use it for is music production, because I always found that Logic Pro ran really well on the Mac Pro. It's just so smooth. All of my devices and peripherals work really well with the Intel version of macOS. And since I sold the Mac Pro, I found that I haven't really been doing any music. I've installed Logic and all of the bits and pieces on my MacBook Pro, but I've never really recorded anything since I sold the Mac Pro. So I'd like to just go back to that. And now they're so cheap. You know, it's £300 and you can get yourself a decent one. Look at this. This is what have we got here? A quad-core Xeon. Well, I've got the CPU, so that's not a problem. 32 gigs of RAM. I'll go for the full 64, of course. And we've got the two D300 graphics cards. So that's not what I want. I'd ideally like to have a D700 equipped machine or a possibly I'd take a D500 Equip machine. Not that I need loads of GPU performance for running Logic Pro, but obviously I'm going to play around with it because I'm a geek, so I'd like to have the best graphics card possible. With the caveat, of course, that the D700s suffered even more from the overheating. Anyway, I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger, but I am thinking very seriously about it. So please let me know in the comments, if I do this, what do you want to see me do with it? Is there content you'd like to see on the channel? And what I want to know as well is, what's your dirty secret when it comes to tech like this? Do you lust after flawed computers like the Mac Pro, even though it makes no logical sense to buy one? Is there something that just kind of sticks in your head, perhaps for nostalgia reasons? It's like, I always wanted one of those, so you kind of go out and buy it. And was the experience as good as you expected, or was it better left as a memory? Anyway, I'm very interested to read your comments on this. For me, I am just going to keep shopping, but these prices are getting dangerously close to the point where I'm just going to have to do it. What a stupid mistake that'll be. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you again soon for some more geekery.